All right, I'd like to call to order the policy committee meeting, noting that all board members are here as well as a lot of guests. Not a lot of them, some guests, so. First thing I'd like is an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we don't have anyone here for public comments, and we did not receive any through email, noting that. So I think we'll get right into the review of the policies. I'll turn it over to Randy.
All right, thank you. So today we have quite a few policies on the agenda. This will actually take us to the end of the 300s. And that would, so these policies will not move to Monday's board meeting. These will go, the ones that we're doing today will go to the May board. So that's really kind of where we sit. Once we get through these, Rebecca and I are probably going to take a few week pause so we can get caught up with where we're at. We also have, we're working with Barry Forbes at the School Board Association. He's the one who helps really with putting together the grid, and he has started on the 400 series. So that'll be most likely a project we'll start bringing back to policy meetings. I'm going to guess sometime in May and then throughout the summer. So that's where we're at. So today, appreciate Rick and Aaron being here because there's a few policies as we've gone through them that just as they came forward with Ted, Rebecca, and my review, we just felt it was good to have someone else here who kind of spent a little bit more time diving into that. The internet policies, which are really the first number that we're going to deal with, that deal with the internet all the way up through like the website and technology needs. Those are all ones that Rick has worked on and taken a look at. I'm just going to take them one at a time. And then if there are kind of questions, Rick can be here to kind of fill in. But when we start to look at the first one, which is 365, it'll be renumbered to 363.2, internet safety and acceptable use. One of the things that we've had here is that we've really taken kind of a blending approach to this policy. There's some things that Rick has really highlighted that he wanted to change in there to make it more current with some of our practice, and also parallel that with some of the PRDPs. So Rick, is there anything you'd like to highlight, particularly with that one? That's a pretty thick policy. That's a pretty important policy for us. Anything you'd like to highlight with the changes you made?
We went with this was the recommended kind of policy from WAS, and after reading through it, I really liked everything that it covered. Really, the only I think change is that we just updated contacts and responsibilities to include myself, and then also in the under 1C, the building principal, just for the who should be reported if there are any concerns or violations. Other than that, I think those were going to be the big changes for that policy.
Right, and I think that this is really the policy that's kind of the umbrella policy, the internet acceptability. The rules are the ones where we get really into the meat.
Yeah.
So we're looking to adopt a PRG here, but then for the other ones, make sure that our current acceptable use aligns with best practice and current use. So we'll get to that one next. So Ted, I forget how we did this. Did we kind of go with these in bunches, or we approve each one as we went through? You remember? Rebecca?
In here, we were approving each one. We wouldn't need to, I think. I don't think we need to.
Yeah, we could kind of walk through all of them if you want, and as long as we had the feedback in the notes.
Yeah.
And maybe if we feel that if there's concern, we could say, let's table that one. Or
All right, and then at the end, we can just make a motion to bring them all forward as we get there. However you'd like to do that. Does that work?
that work.
All right.
Mhm, sure.
It simplifies your life too a little bit here,
Yep.
Rebecca. All right, so for this one, any questions with regards to 363.2?
I don't have any.
I do have.
All right. So now moving into the next two, these are really, it'll be, let's see what we got here. 365 rule 1 will be numbered to 363.2 rule 1. And then we'll also do rule 2. We'll kind of do those together. These are both this is kind of the meat of the acceptable use pieces. One is for staff and one is for students. And this is one that I know, Rick, you spent a little bit more time on
Mhm.
with regards to kind of reviewing where our practices and the language. It's been a few years since we've really kind of dove into that in a little bit more depth. So I'll let you take over and just kind of talk about a few of the things that you've addressed in here.
Okay.
And then open it up for any questions.
Okay. Yeah, going through this one, just kind of doing a little bit of cleanup. First paragraph, it initially said provide teachers, and I just changed it to all staff because this really applies to all staff in the district. And then in the end of the second paragraph, just added expectations right up front if there are any types of violations of the policy. There was a section available in resources that I just didn't feel needed to be in the policy. It basically just listed technology that staff would, work-related technology that staff would get or use. And I know we have that in other documents, so I just didn't feel that there needed to be in here. Couple changes to, let's see here. Oh, a digital citizenship. Just a couple minor edits, and then removed, I don't know if you guys have a copy of the original policy.
We have everything.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so number 10 here. Didn't really feel that it was pertinent. It was just too general, and we address in other parts of the policy, if people see something that is involved, we can how to respond to it. Let's see here. And just set expectations on the responsibility for reporting, just added a sentence in there about reporting anything that's observed. Oh, there was a reference in number 3 is technology protection measure that I'm not sure where it came from. There was something for defining obscenity called the Miller test, which wasn't really clear what that test applied to. So we actually removed that because we do address some state defined statutes for obscenity and what that is. Felt that kind of covered everything under there.
So you I don't know what the Miller test is, so no one knows.
It was real obscure. And reading through it, it was hard to understand exactly. It was, I don't know, I think very vague, and it left it open to wide interpretation, I think, of what they were trying to say obscenity was. And we just, I guess I felt the state statute that we referenced really covers it and didn't feel it was necessary.
Any questions that anyone on the committee has?
Yeah.
with regards to 7 use. So do you see, are there significant differences between the student one and the staff one?
Not major, let me just jump over to the student and put here. They were pretty similar. I guess students, we've got a section that specifically for them addresses mobile and more on protection measures based on COPA compliance and FERPA. Those are probably the big differences between the staff and the student, and then also addressing mobile places for students.
Some of the things with students that we look at things like our filtering and such, there are laws that we have to follow around that, the Children's Internet Protection Act and some other ones that are associated with that.
So we address what we're doing to comply with those laws within the student policy.
This piece I do see getting implemented with students occasionally, as we have kids who are doing something that is not appropriate with the internet. We've had this where they've either lost their privileges or they've had it only in supervised circumstances. So there's been kids who violated this, and then this does get utilized. The staff piece certainly as well, but probably it's been the one that gets the most attention is ones, and we have students.
Is there something for the students in the handbook that's a little bit more boiled down? Telling how to use the internet or what the policies are?
Yeah, and the handbook goes through both policies as well as other use like their Chromebooks.
Equipment.
Yeah.
And this is, the use of the internet is assumed parent okay. And they don't have to say that the kids can be on it. We assume that they can be.
There is I think a form that they can opt out.
Okay,
Yeah.
out,
or
otherwise
it
it's-
should be all access, including Chromebook access. And, yeah.
Is there anyone who opts out?
I
don't remember.
Yeah, I never heard of anybody that's completely out there.
I mean, they use it in curriculum so much.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, so it would be pretty different.
challenging
now. Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody opt out. We've pulled their rights, and then we have to work with them in a different way for a period of time.
And yeah, and for violations, depending on the scope of it, we do things like set specific restrictions on, for example, like if there's an issue with YouTube, then we can create a separate organization to put them in that, then it's what they can access.
Okay.
Any questions on these two? That kind of continues on when we have 365 exhibit. This was one that we had actually talked about repealing.
Mhm.
This was kind of the form you're talking about, Rick,
Yeah,
but I just didn't think we needed a form in policy that
Mhm.
articulated that, so that was the reason we were. It's not that we're removing the right for them to opt out, it's just having a form in policy just as for that purpose to make sense. to
Okay.
us.
yeah.
So our recommendation would be to repeal that.
So you still keep the form, but it's not the policy.
Generally, yeah. A lot of those, Judy, I think are things you just, you're working with parents, if a parent wants to opt their child out, we'll work with them.
Okay.
Document it. And some things like this are coming, even with the parent email, and some of these are. Probably pretty big. Yeah, I think we managed to, I don't think we had too much robust email use at that point. All right, the next one is the website. And what we are looking at. So recoding of it. I think what we're changing, there's some things with regards to kind of who this all kind of reports through, which I believe does. Annie. Anything else that you have there, Rick? So this is
Yeah,
365.1.
and just aligning it with our kind of our new structure with the website and the process that we use for assigning webmasters. Because one of the struggles that we had with the old site was there were just about anybody who set up as a webmaster since we were using consistency of the design. So just
One of the things that we've done that Rick and Annie have done a lot of work with regards to our website, just as kind of an aside as we're looking at this. Our website's really under quite a few much tighter controls today than it was a couple of years ago. Because you had a lot of opportunity for staff to create like their own easily created like Google sites and then just link them to our website. And we don't allow that anymore. So it's a lot tighter controls as far as who actually has control to actually change the website in itself. And we've also put some parameters in as far as what we allow on the website.
So they're not able to access that.
They're not able to post. If you were a teacher, Judy, you can create your own school site that only you control, but then link it to our website.
It's technically impossible to do that.
We don't allow that anymore, correct? I mean, I understand the reason why that was nice, but it was also something that was outside of our control to be able to monitor, get into, modify. So we really kind of tightened all of those provisions up. So that's, as we're talking website, this is a good time to talk about some practices that we've also. And that
There's-
fits into some of the webmaster stuff.
And there's no indication of Annie's position here.
I don't think it's
Policy.
in,
Need that?
it was mentioned.
Yeah.
You've had one that I might not have attached the right one that I'm looking at it. I'm
Yeah,
making
that's what
myself-
I thought the one that we had Annie's piece in it.
Right, but the one I have on here doesn't, so I'm guessing I probably attached the incorrect one.
So you'd reference that position.
Yeah.
In policy.
Was that the one that you did? That's the one that's in board book, but I seem to remember the one that we
I do too.
reviewed had Annie's name in it.
And we're not changing the number of this one, right? So I bet it's, oh no, I still got it.
Yeah, I just, yeah, they added, the only difference was just adding Andy's position and my position.
That's what I thought we had in there. That was the one
Yeah.
that I thought we reviewed.
Somewhere along the line, oh, I just found it.
All right. You have it, Rebecca?
I think it's this
I
one.
think that just so
Pull it up.
authorized.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there it
Yeah.
is.
That's the one we reviewed.
Yeah.
So the one on the screen is actually the one that we're gonna be having you act on. So I apologize, we had the wrong one attached here. It really is changing, as I said, the piece with Annie's position, who our webmasters are. And that really gets into kind of limiting the ability for narrowing down and having more tighter controls over our webmasters if we can actually change the website. Okay.
So you didn't have that one in anywhere, that updated one?
I had the wrong one attached.
Yeah.
I think that's the one you and I and Rebecca reviewed, but it's the
Correct.
wrong one to have up here.
Yeah,
Correct.
as we talked, the hurricane of
Yep.
policy. Getting a little overwhelming.
Yes. So yeah, the one that we'll be acting on and moving forward is the one with the red that Rebecca just had on the screen.
Yeah.
You guys on any issue with that?
Oh, that's good.
And then the next one is 363.3. There was an old policy 365.2. We're recommending adopting the policy resource guide 363.3. This is with regards to assistive technology, which is really just reiterating that we need to support our students with IEPs, special ed, with the technology that fits them.
And that's a broad one. It isn't specific to
Correct.
differing kind of technologies.
No, that can be anything from, that can, assistive technology can range from a lot of different categories.
Yeah.
Some of the things we have with assistive technology we own as a district, sometimes you'll see us that will borrow it from like a CISA for a specific kid.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
there's different things, but that is a requirement that we have to provide for students who have that in their IEP. So that's what that policy is requiring. Any questions for Rick while he's here? Otherwise, I think we're to the end of the tech ones here. Is that right?
Well,
Or do I have another one?
he's got my spreadsheet, so
Oh,
I was just trying to see if there was another one hiding in there. I don't think so. Nope, I think we're at the end.
Everything we could agree.
Yep.
Thanks, Rick.
Maybe more as a general, just not policy, but the culture of how the school changes, phones in them, you know, the use of, is there any comments on that?
Phones?
Telephone.
These things,
Oh.
and how they've changed the way school works, you know,
Oh.
this policy, obviously
Yeah,
allowing it.
it definitely becomes a different entity. I mean, if you go back a number of years when cell phones first came out, they weren't allowed. I mean, they weren't allowed in school. That was when you had the old flip phones type things. You'd have kids in their pockets learning how to text without looking. then you came to the point of where you had smartphones, which have some applicability, certainly with access to the internet, but our kids also have devices. I think the piece that and I think this is the conversation that kind of falls to the high school, is how do you have to uniformly kind of adapt how you're going to utilize them or allow them in the classroom. And I think that's one conversation that's happening to create more uniformity. There's also a piece that from a parent perspective, they want their kid to have their phone in the event there's an emergency. It's also the challenge for us that whenever there is something that happens at a school, before we can get a communication out, the communication's already gone. The example I always use is that there was an event happening at the high school several years ago when one of my older daughters was in the school. And by the time I walked from Aaron's office to Brian Kirsten's office, my daughter was texting me, wanting to know what was going on. And it was just a good reminder that that's what every kid just did. And so we're always behind on the communication piece, but it's kind of that safety piece along with the educational piece, and then trying to make sure that it's not a distraction. But as far as the things that occur with cell phones and all of the different things, the TikToks, all of those things, from just a management standpoint with kids, that does create a number of issues. And that's not just things happening at school, that's things that happen outside of school that find their way into school.
But we don't write policy on that. That's more of a discipline.
There is policy when you get to the next series as far as things. It's probably not as directed at cell phones, but it's more of like a disciplinary thing as far as what can you address inside of school and outside of school. Certainly if it's a distraction, you can address it. But I think the conversation, at least that I've heard that's coming from primarily the high school right now, I think is trying to get uniformity on how everybody is kind of consistent expectations classroom to classroom.
So my understanding is like at the intermediate school and the middle school, the cell phones are the kind of the standard practices. Cell phones are to be kept in your bag or in your locker.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the high school, then that's like you said, so that's where it's different.
And it's, I mean, like you said, no policy, and we'll probably get to it in the students' policies, but each classroom, the teacher could have their own policies, like you gotta leave them. They have the latitude to do that.
They
I
have some
guess.
latitude. Some of them may have them use them in class for whatever reason. Some of them may have them where they have to keep them put away. Yeah, I think there's that. And I think that's the conversation that's happening. And I think that's some of the feedback from kids is this consistency from place to place.
Thanks.
So do we want to approve the whole technology bunch?
If you,
Would that help you, Rebecca, to do that one?
We do jump
Or
back.
if you want to do the whole,
that is true, you kind of.
We do jump back and forth on the
Oh, okay.
salmon colored
Yeah.
ones. We kind of will bounce back. to.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I mean, yeah, the technology ones were in a nice tight little group. but
The other ones are
others-
mixed, okay?
So we'll move on.
If we'll move on. The next one is school counseling, then we'll get to the co-curricular one, but I don't wanna. We'll get to Aaron and get moving with those. The school counseling program is they're looking to replace the school counseling program one with the PRG. And I think that there was. The only thing that we had that was a change here was it's trying to clarify some language in what would be the second paragraph, which was staff members involved with planning these services shall. And I think it should say seek or shall.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah, I
crossed,
think
saw
we-
that both.
Yeah,
crossed out.
kind of crossed out both. It should only be crossing out.
See, I
It's
mean,
seek the input of students, parents and guardians and other community members. We felt that the word involved was just too broad as far as interpretation, but it should be seeking their input. Which I think addresses kind of the spirit of what that's getting at. Yeah, and here they were both crossed out. That's not meant to be.
Yeah.
On the second page, you just see some of the yellow areas. Those were just in case we wanted to add something else. That's how the policy was, gave us latitude. We didn't have anything else to add.
Where would we, and maybe I haven't read it, where would we have any counseling on drugs and alcohol. That kind of stuff. That's not in the counseling program.
It's not in this, there is some things I believe. You actually might get some of that into the next, this is all instruction, 300s, the
Okay.
400s of students. So I'm gonna guess there's gonna be more that's gonna come up as with regards to that. But I think the counseling, I mean, just generally, really the counseling and all of our student services pieces, that's where you get the supports around the AODA. One of our social workers is assigned as an AODA social worker.
This is more the instructional.
So this is kind of the broad instructional
Okay.
counseling that we're having a counseling program. That's really what this policy says. All right. Now, the next ones we're gonna have is the 370s, and Aaron and Rebecca and I have had a few different conversations with regards to this. And we're gonna make a few modifications here, and there's gonna be a few things that we believe we need to kind of bring back. So, policy 370. Yeah, policy 370 is the one we're dealing with on extracurricular and co-curricular programs. And at this point, we are looking to replace that with the PRG version of that. And I think what this is really outlining are the general parameters of what it's gonna follows the same pattern that our other policies have, that you have an initial policy that kind of serves as kind of your base as far as just general concepts around co-curriculars, and then the rules really get into more of the specifics. So Aaron, anything with regards to just the general rule, the 370?
No, I think that part's solid. Yeah, good. It's what we have. When it comes to, you want to talk about the rules? Or-
Yeah, we'll take them one at a time and we'll kind of walk our way through those. So 370 is kind of the general one. We're going to adopt the new policy there. Now we're going to get into a number of the different rules here. And the first one is rule 1. And this is with regards to coaches and player ratios. Aaron talked to me yesterday as he's looked around at other districts with regards to what they have for ratios. What you reported to me yesterday was that you just don't see people that have this in some level of policy. I've always felt it's kind of been a nice piece to have in policy as we bring forth different staffing levels for co-curriculars. And it also gives us just a general guide with regards to kind of what are some of the ratios that we find generally acceptable or that have worked for us. What we've changed here a little bit is just with regards to some updated language. We added the dance team to the high school on the first page. And Aaron, which one did you say we needed to add?
Yeah, under B, we need to add cheer. And based on the injury rate for cheer, they should be at the same as like for football, 13-1. It's outside of football, it's the highest injury rate for athletics.
So that's one that we didn't add on here. So what we would request here is, you go back to the first page there, Rebecca. Thank you.
When you say coach and player, can it be, is there a definition of coach there? Are you talking adult supervision or a paid coach?
So this would be paid, these are paid positions. How many paid positions we have? We've never capped like volunteers, if the ratio would get skewed because of volunteers. These would be the paid positions, the FTEs we have for each sport.
Yeah. What I like about this policy is it generally gives us a guide to when we bring in like a recommendation for an additional coach to the board. You'll see it through the consent agenda. They're lining up and being driven by this policy. So from a perspective of like Brian Barsky's kind of working through and determining, do we need a coach? And as Aaron's bringing these forward, this is generally the policy that we lean on for them. But as Aaron has shared, I mean, like cheerleading, I agree with you. When you're starting to do some of the stunting and some of those other items, it does require greater supervision. So I like just having something here that gives you a guide. So our recommendation would be to keep this policy. The changes would be just to add the dance team to the front page. Under the high school, add the cheerleading as Aaron just articulated. And then just on the back page, as we start to look at, we've given some like specific examples like future problem solving, drama, music, the musical and play at the high school. We just updated those, one with some latitude that if additional co-curriculars were added at the middle school, that it would. So we just don't limit ourselves by specifically naming those. We name the ones that we have, and then we say if or others that are of like activities. And then also just adding the director and the director assistant at the play and the musical, as those are no longer alternate years or they're happening every year. And then we move the dance teams to the front page. So
Do we want to include like some of our athletics aren't included, like mountain biking? So would that fall somewhere?
probably doesn't fall.
Okay, so that's not,
It-
we're just giving examples.
You're
of this. Of
giving
course,
really-
we're not including all of them.
That's, I
Okay.
would say that's probably true. For these specific ones, I think there's trying to articulate that as we look at other new programs like that, Katie. I think I would say that we would utilize them as kind of a guide for
Okay.
where we're going. And that may be a piece. What do you think, Aaron? Should that be added in here specifically? And it's a little bit more difficult to. Not sure what the ratio should be for that.
Yeah, that would be, I would be looking at. Like our 20-1 cross-country swim and golf, where it's, I mean, it's an activity, it's not necessarily you consider a contact activity. Which wrestling, basketball, lacrosse.
Would it help to add that in here? Would it help to add?
I think it would be, and if we're gonna articulate them individually like this, we probably should add mountain biking.
All right, and you would add that after,
I would probably include that with the cross-country swim and golf,
okay,
20-1.
It's still considered a club. We just brought it on
right,
as a club,
We,
right?
yeah, but we treat it as a category A activity.
Yeah.
Similar to how lacrosse and ski and snowboard are still club
Yeah.
sports. But in terms of our code handbook, in terms of requirements, we treat it the same as all other sports, so.
do we have that on here? Like we don't have.
That's what I mean. We have a whole bunch of other ones. I
Yeah,
think,
that's,
on here.
that's,
been
I
the
just
open
use
side.
that as an example.
Yeah.
So I didn't know.
Because if we enter that one.
What if we describe the category as opposed to putting
Yeah.
down the actual one, the one that, I don't know how you do that though.
So I think. This kind of echoes what Randy said, but category A is such a broad thing. You have football and hockey, which are. Contacts with collision sports. And to say they should be, like, if we're just gonna have that broad of a category and say all category A's will be 20-1. That hamstrings some of those sports that need those two sports, gymnastics, where you need greater supervision versus. Where you have golf, dance, cross country, which are a very low rate of injury, don't need nearly as much supervision. So it's hard to lump all of them together because it really does a disservice to the sports on each extreme. In terms of how if we have to staff it based on those ratios.
Right. It may just make sense to leave it out right now because of what is it. There are a few other ones that are kind of that club area. I mean, we use this as a guide. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of how, if there was the numbers going out for mountain biking that we needed to assess where that was, that will. Generally, what we are doing is looking at comparables anyway. Then
Do we need an asterisk that says this is a guide?
It's if you look under coach player, that language there,
Okay,
it says approximate ratio subject to annual review. of the
yeah,
AD
okay,
principal,
thank you.
Final decision by the board.
I
So
like that.
I think that still
That
gives.
covers it.
administration and the board the leeway to.
Thank you.
But you are bringing up, I mean, as you mentioned, the contact sports, that's a criteria. I mean, there could be criteria given that dictate what those ratios would be. Do you list those criteria that get known to be?
Maybe that would be under the explanation when it comes to the board to make the final decision.
Right.
Then you can bring up the reasons for wanting it that way. Not having it written.
Some of them are also just how that sport operates. Volleyball, basketball, wrestling, a little bit different than soccer is spread on a little different event. If you go solely by safety, soccer's got a lot of injuries as well.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, I've never heard any concerns with regards
No,
to this policy,
that's-
so I mean, I
but
think.
They
it's
put it down, then it seems like, well, why are we?
Right.
Mhm. And
Lock
what's the
into
difference
this.
between 18-1 and 20-1? And
Right. I mean, I kind of agree with that, so. To a degree, it seems arbitrary, or it seems to be numbers that fit within what we do anyway, so it's like. I don't-
Some of these you also, I don't know how much it was tied into, like Aaron, when you start getting into like. I guess that wouldn't be for that. Would the board like us to go back to, would you like us to go back and review this? And there's gonna be some other ones in co-curriculars we're not gonna run through, we're not gonna recommend here today. So if there's other ones, if this wouldn't be a one-off in the co-curricular area.
well, I just wonder if we don't want to have guidelines for when we establish ratios, not the specific sports.
I would agree, because we're approving this and there is no problem with it, but yet some of you look back and it's like, why do you have these, you know, and there's nothing.
Why don't we just do this? Let's us. Let's rework that a bit and we'll bring it back.
Because sometimes it's based not just on the danger of the sport, but the organization of the sport too. So. Because I know so much about sports, I'd like to know the difference.
All right. That's good to know. What we can do is, Aaron, maybe you and I can just meet with the varsity and we can kind of look at that and see if there's a way to improve that. But what we'll do is if it's okay, we'll just to kind of keep us moving.
Yeah,
Is if we can kind of
let's hold on.
Yeah.
clarify some of these between now and then, maybe we'll bring it back with those pieces.
And it's not that I personally don't have any issue with it, but I'd like that, you know, defining it a little.
Yeah.
More criteria for it.
Okay. Now we're gonna get into a few that are. 370 Rule 2, which is co-curricular program eligibility. Aaron, this is the one you talked to me about yesterday.
Yeah, I had just said, you know, this language is all covered in our co-curricular handbook.
So the
And so-
language is fine, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
right, we're looking at, yeah, that one, yeah. But it's all covered in our handbook, so if we ever make it, which is approved by the board every year in July. So if we ever make a change there, now you're having to make a change on this too. And reapproving this. So I don't know that putting it in as a rule is necessarily needed if you're annually reviewing and approving handbooks.
Right.
Especially like this year, Jeff Keenest, myself, some of our coaches and advisors have really gone over, and we're recommending several changes to the middle school handbook for next year. And so then you're looking at, so I just, if it's something that's being approved every year annually by the board, it has basically the weight of policy that way. I don't know that it's needed to be a rule within your board policies.
I mean, how often do we change eligibility?
So in terms of academic eligibility and stuff at the high school, we haven't changed, but like I said, this year, middle school, we're changing. We're making a pretty different, I want to call radical is probably too strong a word, but a significant change to academic eligibility rules at middle school.
Okay,
So,
I can go either way on this one. I mean, this is really with regards to.
You go to page 2.
I mean, there's a few pieces that we have to make sure that we realize that's the highlighted piece at the end is making sure that we have a piece for home-based education programs. We have to allow that by law. So that's the one change that we have here. I
And
don't
that
want
wouldn't
to,
show up in the student
you know,
handbook.
we can have that in the student handbook as well, and that certainly can be there.
yeah, it's in there because we have language. About how homeschool, so I just have a form they fill out.
How they get to participate and stuff.
And it's kind of a question on this one is, and I don't want to water down our policies so much that we don't have anything in there. But I also realize I agree with what Aaron says, is that there are things that we'll be bringing back. It just means that if we change things to the code or eligibility, you need to bring the policy with it. So that's really where the change is taking place, and then we're articulating the policy within the handbook. Or you use the handbook as your policy.
From an administrative perspective, when we're trying to enforce the handbook guidelines, or is it
Some of these it's helpful.
more enforceable, or I don't know the right words, to have it in policy versus if they're.
It does, I think so. And it's in my mind, it's always helpful to be able to refer it back to a policy of where our handbook is aligned. But I agree with Aaron, they both have when they're approved by the board, they both have the power of policy. So, I guess for right now, I would just probably keep it. There's no harm in it, Aaron, to keep it from your perspective. It's just a matter of we have to make sure that we keep it up to date, and as things with the middle school piece come through, we update it. So this actually might be one, since there are changes coming, that we just hold on it and don't act on it, and I line it up with when the changes that you and Jeff are working on. I didn't realize that as we were going through that, but to adopt it right now, do you think you'll have those by May?
Yeah, so I just shared kind of the draft with Jeff and the other committee members this week. Our last meetings on April 24th, our goal is to have that all finished then, and so we'd be able to bring it to the May board meeting then.
Do you have a kind of a sense of where that's heading, Aaron, just as far as the type of changes that we might see?
Yeah, so there's the two most significant changes. One is to our academic eligibility in middle school. The philosophy behind it is we wanted a way to more quickly identify students that were struggling academically and get them the assistance they needed, and also to have a faster way to get them back to regain their eligibility. So that's one of the biggest changes. The other one was some language regarding our category B and C activities, and what I generally refer to as our conduct unbecoming portions of the code, where it's not an alcohol tobacco type of code violation, but it's your behavior at school events, things like that, and how it can impact your ability to participate in middle school play or those things. So those are probably the two most significant changes or additions to the middle school code. There's some other minor language stuff in some other sections, but those are the two biggest portions.
So given that some of that is working its way through, you'll see that in some of the other policy and rules that are coming forward. When I would rather just hold on those until we get those flushed out, then I can bring them to you at one time.
Will the rules be significantly different than high school? I mean, they're clamping down more on little things.
In terms of the conduct unbecoming part, I would say no. They're not significantly different. it is more spelled out in the middle school handbook than it is in the high school handbook currently. So we've got actually kind of listed out sort of a new spectrum of discipline for those activities. And that was a desire coming from Jeff and from some of the advisors, because there wasn't that kind of language in there before. If you were misbehaving at we'll just say like if you came to a football game, you misbehaved there, we didn't really have any language that would have you might have a school consequence, but you could still show up and be in the musical as if you weren't causing troubles at school events. And our middle school principal, administration, and advisors felt like there should be some language in there to address that. Your behavior at events, things like that should be able to be addressed too, if you're going to participate in our other activities.
Good. Thank you.
So what you see throughout some of the policies here, and it jumps around in our policy number, which we're going to try to address as we go forward, is it does address things like the co-curricular code. Eligibility is one, and this is in the attendance, academics, etc. And then you have some of the more specific pieces with regards to the code on like alcohol, tobacco, and those pieces.
And some of those pieces at the high school level are dictated by the WIA. WIA has certain minimum penalties that we have to have. And since at the high school we're WIA affiliated, we have to at least have those. Like we can go above, we can be more restrictive, but we have to meet their certain. So they're like our academic eligibility rules at the high school are what's dictated to us by the WIA. Whereas at the middle school, we're not WIA affiliated, so we can have a little more leeway to be, I would personally would call it maybe more forgiving or more lenient than we're able to be at the high school because of that affiliation.
So one of the things I would recommend we do today is as we go, I'd like to bring some of the co-curricular code pieces back, probably through like the co-curricular committee. And that's going to impact not only this policy, but a few others. So we can have a few more eyes looking at it. And I think there's a few things just with instances that have come up this year that just have precipitated us wanting to kind of have a look at a few different items. So even though they're in our packet here today and they're under the co-curriculars, there's a couple of these that I'm going to want to test as we've had some further discussion in the last several days. I think it's as prudent that we kind of just hold on them and we'll bring them back through the process, but they're really more the ones surrounding that code of conduct. Because I think there's some things that we can either clarify, or as Aaron said, there's a few things that administration are looking. So for this one, I would say let's wait to see kind of where that middle school piece goes. And I'll run some of these things also to.
And also, as you referenced, is this in the handbook or whatever? Is it such that the handbook refers or references the policy number as well, or should it, like,
Right.
or I think that would make a good idea to
I think generally what it's done is that the handbook has really reflected policy in most cases. And it's kind of the redundancy that Aaron's talking about. You just have to remember that when you change one, you have to change the other. That always hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So that's just the piece to tie them together. But to your point, Katie, there's for some of these things, I think it is good having it as policy too. It just adds another level of review and another level of assistance, I think, to us as we kind of go through and have to implement.
just so they aren't at odds with each other. That's the whole thing, like.
Right. So that's gonna be the piece we'll have to look at, but I would, as Aaron and I have talked the last couple of days here, I guess for this one, I would just hold on it. Let us bring back some of the updates that are coming, and there'll be a few others as we go through that you'll see the same thing.
I'm flying blind now. My screen went dark. I need to bring back here. Computer's on, but I'm dark, so.
All right, this is rule number 3, again, associated with co-curriculars. So this is one just to keep the current rule. This is talking about offerings for co-curricular programs, as opposed to the word certify, where stating to provide. It's a better word. But otherwise, it's just a general policy. I think just referencing those. And then we have Rule 4. This is the one we have some changes to that Rebecca and I added. This just really has, this is really just talking about kind of when we do new requests and then also how we address paid advisors. So what our process has been is that by end of October, we want to have any new club requests come in. And any new club requests at that point are generally ones that have to show viability for 3 years before they're eligible for pay. The one piece that has not been in our policy, but has been our practice, has been how do you then go back to kind of receive pay after you've shown the viability of your program. And this is a piece that, as you've been on the board the last several years, you've seen these come at different times from the spring all the way through the middle of the fall. What we're trying to do is have them all come as part of the budget process. So this is really a piece that we've worked with the HR department on that really outlines that they should be getting those pieces to us, and we'll be collecting that information in the winter in February, and that we can then bring it into have it as part of our budget process going into the spring. Only typo I see there is just to add the number 3 should probably be written out as up on top 3 consecutive years. It probably should be written out. So this is just kind of updating it to our current practice for how you become a paid advisor. But we'd like to have that information to us by March, so that then we can get it into our process. And if people miss that date, I'd really like to stay tight with that. But our process will look at things through the HR department to look at which clubs would be eligible, and then get to those advisors for them to bring forward kind of, are they at a point where they're still viable or not? But that way, I think it addresses what I've heard from the budget committee, is then you see these things as part of the process as opposed to coming out of the back. Which is kind of how but without having that language in there, it seemed to give the impression that you could do it enough. This case, I would keep the form with it. It just seems to flow well with that. And it's also a place that I think people look for when they are looking for how to apply for a co-curricular position or adding in the club. Primarily, these are clubs that are getting added. That's really what they are. Okay. The next one we have is 370.1. This is non-athletic competitions. This is just talking about state and national competitions. Generally, I think we were talking about is national ones, because the state ones I'm able to do many of the approvals for. So this is just kind of updating it with that language. It does state in here just about some things with state competitions, but it's generally focused on the national. So think of it as DECA or some of those groups that are traveling. Okay. 271. 371 is being recoded to 371.1. This is really your student initiated clubs and similar organizations. We're looking to adopt the PRG version of this policy. encouraging student-led organizations to do what that's intended to do. Next one on student publications. As we've reviewed the options here, we're recommending we keep our current policy, which is 372. That's in line with kind of our review and then also the review of Barry Forbes when he looked at it. We felt that keeping ours best fit in line with kind of where we were as a district. 373 is student social events. This is just really articulating that we're able to have and continue to promote the social events. So think that as dances and those type of things that we do primarily at our schools. This is just really a policy that kind of articulates the value of those and the ability of the principals to work and make those occur. Here, and I'm just going to keep going in order because it's easy
I know, I
to do
should
that.
have 370.
And I know that some of them come back to you in a minute, which is
Aaron has a pause. Right?
but we'll get there. 374 is starting to get into student fundraising management. This is one that there were some recommendations and some options within the PRG. But when Ellie and Steve took a look at these pieces, I mean, we've already done some work with regards to a policy on this, particularly as we look at the use of class immunity as a process for us. And then some of the other areas as far as levels of approval, et cetera. So after reviewing it, the recommendation from our business office was to keep our current policy. I think there's a few items that we added to it just with regards to the clarification purposes. But this has been one I think we've spent quite a bit of time on trying to work on over the years, just trying to give some better guidance to it and levels of approval that just didn't line up necessarily with where WCSD's policy was written. So it's probably one that we're just choosing more of a local approach.
The funds raised by groups, that's always been the policy that that money is held by the district, right?
Depends what the group. You mean like it's just a student group? Yeah, if you had like. So if let's say Pay It Forward Club raises money, that's all held by the district. Yeah, and that's kind of what you're going to get into with the student activities funds in the next policy.
Okay.
But you also have some of these fundraising pieces are also part of any sort of our
Booster groups.
of other groups that are also raising money. So some of those, some of those are held by us, but others are held elsewhere. These are generally our guidelines that we provide as we even provide to our booster clubs, and it'll be part of the communication we share with them as we kind of go through our handbook as far as what are some of the fundraising guidelines. Student fund management, and this is another one that was Steve and Allie took a look at the fund management policy that was recommended by the PRG. I think as they looked at that and then they looked at the one that we have here, they felt that one of the things that's important for them is for people to read the policy and at least understand what it is. And I think the PRG was quite complex. And they didn't feel that was going to be a clear communicator to people as far as what that policy was. So from their perspective, they felt keeping with our current policy fit with really the processes that they would like to see, and also felt that it was clear.
Board book on your phone just doesn't work. It's not.
You could go
Like-
blind.
Your computer died over there, Ted?
It didn't die, but my monitor on it.
You want a different computer?
No, I just. I'm good.
We'll keep pulling them up here. Yeah, thank you.
I have them all printed out. I just.
So that's 375. Now we're getting back to Aaron's, so I'm not really sure why they separated the 370s and then had a gap to 377. And what we initially talked about was repealing these. And what, after some further discussion, what I am thinking about is actually just, there's some of the language that it states, well, it's included in 370, but I don't think it's clearly articulated all in 370. So what I would recommend we do here is that we renumber them as one of the rules of 3. So take them from 377 and just renumber them as part of 370 as part of the rule. So where we have 377 that Rebecca has up there, I think we attach that as one of the rules, whichever order that would go in. And then we have the next 2 here are with regards to co-curricular code and policies. And again, this kind of fits in with that eligibility piece that Aaron talked about. I'd like us to review these, not only from the work that Aaron is doing with Jeff at the middle school, but also I think it'd be just good for us to kind of review with our co-curricular committee. And just kind of see where we're at with some of the practices, some of the things that if there's anything we want to clean up or articulate differently. And then we can bring these all together. That way, I think that it keeps that process together with regards to the policy piece and also the handbook. So 377, this is when I first, the one that back, Rebecca, I'm sorry, I'm jumping you around. Apologize.
Yeah,
Just the regular 370, 377, sorry. The one that we said we were going to repeal.
this one.
Yeah. So what I'm looking to do there is to move that to as one of the rules. And then the subsequent rules that go along with that, we'll bring back again as subsequent rules of 370 rule. We had like 4 or 5 or something of that nature.
Whatever it ends up.
But we have some work to do there, I believe.
So these 3 would pull that out of this.
Yeah, I think so.
Consideration.
Yeah, just to keep them together,
Yeah.
and then we'll move them. But if we're gonna be reviewing some of the things as far as eligibility and codes, let's do that all together with the handbook and this. But the document here says repeal, and I think what we've come up with is we're gonna renumber them. So I think that there is some value to the language that they have in there. All right. Next item we have is. These, the next 2 are the code, that was 370. 1 or 2. So now we're on the state tournament attendance. Again, as opposed to having this as kind of a separate item into 377, tie it to 370 as one of the rules. I think generally what we're looking at is the I think I would just keep this policy. It really just articulates what we do with state tournament attendance. That seems that's still accurate for what we do, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah,
That's from my review. That's where I revert to. So that'll be a renumber to the part of the 370s. That makes sense to you, Aaron. Let's put all these together.
yeah.
I think after you and I talked yesterday, it just made it clear, like, why are we separating them? No,
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
no, it doesn't.
So what was that? That was, you're gonna renumber this? Is that-
Yeah, so this is all tied to that 377, and we think,
Yep.
why don't we put all these
Or
co-curriculars all together under 370? These just get into more detail, and we just put them as rules.
Yeah, you're just. Most of these next ones are just renumbered, they're not actually.
Right. Same with like the random drug test piece.
And you're thinking these will go through the co-curricular committee?
I probably like state attendance. I don't need to, more of the co-curricular code
Okay.
ones, the ones that we just did. Katie.
Yep.
But I think like this one's just pretty
Yep.
boilerplate as far as what we do for state tournaments.
But
and
again,
then-
it's, you're gonna renumber it and put it part. Do we keep it? We're gonna, when you said we have an issue with this, we're gonna vote on this one. or not?
Yeah, we'll vote on that
Yeah.
one, correct. We'll renumber it as part of that 370
Yeah.
once we kind of sort out what the numbering should be.
So that's what I mean. Do we wait then? Cause you don't have the number, or do we?
Well,
How do you?
we could, will we get this
You and
done
I
by the May board?
We can
meeting?
figure out what the numbering is.
So we
Prove it and we'll just,
move it to the board meeting, at the board meeting, I'll have the correct number.
We'll have the right number and we'll work through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My God, are we going too fast here, Rebecca? We gotta keep, we're good. All right.
Renumbering the drug tests too, all of them.
What do you think, Aaron? Just keeping those all under
I think
the,
those are all going to.
those all,
370.
right, agreed. So the next one is 3. Again, we will read
So we're looking at the random. drug
yes,
377.2, the random drug tests. And these are all parts of that 377. We're gonna kind of move them over to 370, tie them in as part of the rule. The drug test piece, I think we're. What we might do here is like, if you have like a 370, it might be 370.2. Something of that nature, so they may not all be rules under there, there'll be some variation off of 370. As I'm reading this, because this also has a rule with it.
Yeah.
So there's 2 parts to this one with regards to random drug tests. The first one, this is talking about kind of that we will be doing these. And the second one is talking just more about kind of some of the processes and some of the things that we're looking at. The change that we've added to this one is with regards to someone who's failed to follow the procedure or just doesn't comply.
Yeah.
That's considered an administrative failure. Some of the things in here are also tied to the co-curricular code,
Yeah,
so we have to kind of look at that as well.
yeah, so you'll find out this language also appears in the code. And
Right.
And this coincides with the WIA.
WIA has no language on drug testing.
Oh, they do.
I would say,
Do they have language on the consequences?
so WIA has a set minimum consequences for first it requires you to have an AOTD policy. And then it has minimum consequences, which are, not kidding, are 1 event. I don't know of a single school that goes with that. Everybody else is greater consequence of that, so. But yeah, you're required to have one by WIA, but really the language and everything is determined by the individual districts.
Okay.
I think that's all mine.
Yeah, I think there.
Well,
Out of season,
there's the student performance thing.
out of season athletic.
Yeah.
clinics.
Oh, the Hanson clinic.
Yeah, we'll get, those are coming real quick there. So the next one is 378, student performances. This is just really talking about that the availability of students to participate in performances in a public venue. I think we're just looking to keep that policy. The next one, this is the one, Aaron, this is probably your last one, is out of season athletic clinics and leagues. This is really, the changes that you put in here are just ones that probably articulate better with the times.
Yeah.
As far as when our facilities are open and how late those facilities can go. So I think you're just updating them from the 8 o'clock to the 9 o'clock and from the 9:30 to 10 o'clock. And then we've also changed from kind of activities director to athletic director. That's really the change in title that we've had for several years. We just haven't really cleaned up in policy. There you go, Aaron. Thank you for being here.
thanks, Aaron.
And the next policy is 381, teaching about controversial issues. And this is one that is, as we've reviewed it, we're recommending that we keep our current policy.
How does this fit in with that flow chart of suggested unusual topics that we did a while ago?
Now, let me look. There's the word.
This is kind of an overarching,
Yeah, it's more of
idea.
an overarching piece. I think that flow chart that you're discussing, I think that's just a tool for helping to address controversial issues or potential controversial issues.
but I like that this is in there, that we back the idea that we need to be able to talk about topics. So.
So you've included two different things here, Rebecca. You have this one, and you have also a PRG version.
Yes, because he talked about the PRG version. And then when we met with Ted, Ted kind of said, well, what does the PRG version look like? So that's why I put it on there.
Yeah.
Just for
So
comparison.
yeah, in your packet, you'll see both. Anybody need a copy of that? And does that
I
cover
can turn
your-
it off if
I can pull up here. There you go. It's like a problem. That was the PRG version. Our thoughts as we looked at it was to keep the current one.
PRG is the 4-page one.
I
Yes.
believe still correct.
And I see Amy back there. I remember Amy saying, and Tim saying, you know, WASB is saying, let's, our current policy is good and we like our current policy.
Have either of you seen, looked at the PRG one?
I'm looking at it right now.
It definitely gets more detailed.
Yep.
And probably in ways that I don't disagree with.
I think PRG is too prescriptive. I think for a policy, this is kind of delving too far.
And yet ours doesn't really address anything. It just says that we can talk about controversial issues. You're kind of saying leave it up to the instructor then.
Well, I'm thinking of not just the instructor, but the whole curriculum process of how we get things in and how it's reviewed and who says this is appropriate. This is putting the burden, I think, on the teacher specifically, if they fall short with these. And I think the controversial issues needs to be looked at more broadly and say this is an acceptable topic or not.
I think it may speak to some of those things where the topic itself is controversial, but it's how it's delivered is what this doesn't address. How it's delivered and presented in a classroom is the issue a lot of times. I see it currently right now.
But isn't that true of anything? So how I deliver my math curriculum is a function of the teacher and the administrator that's supervising them, and there's an issue with my delivery. That isn't a policy issue, that's a
It's a method.
method issue,
It's a pedagogy, whatever.
pedagogy.
There you go. And it's how it's done. I mean, we see it, my kids see it right now, so there's no question on that, and how a topic is, and you are kind of. If you're not on that correct side of thinking, sometimes it gets pretty difficult in parts. So
Mhm.
that's where I think,
But isn't that again speaking to that individual teacher that needs not a policy to refer to, but a discussion with their teaching methods?
Some of this articulated in the school handbook.
Go back to you go to the PRG
Yeah,
one. So I can see.
In their handbooks, I think there is,
something related to this that spells it out
I believe,
in more depth, you're saying?
in more depth than it does in our policy.
Yeah.
Like. But
Do you recall if there's something more specific on this within the handbooks? And you're probably more focused.
I don't, I'm reviewing the staff handbooks right now, actually, but I haven't.
All right.
So I can't say.
All right, thank you. There's a couple ways we can go with this one. If that's a question, answer, we can make sure that we can bring both of these forward for discussion.
I mean, I don't disagree with our policy, but I think it leaves things a little too, in my opinion. Yeah, young students need to deal with controversial stuff, controversial. I guess,
It just feels like this is an overarching one about what we're going to teach or how we're going to do it. And if you get into this, then you can start saying, well, at what grade do we introduce geometry or algebra, or when is it appropriate? It's the board policy getting involved with the nitty-gritty of curriculum.
I don't think so.
I guess it's really focused on the controversial topics.
Absolutely.
Kind of core pieces.
Yeah, but the concept is what I'm dealing with, not why we have to be specific in this one and not in other areas of curriculum. Not that we should allow these things to happen, but I think there's a different venue than policy.
Different venue than policy
To if there's an issue about a teacher not handling a topic correctly,
Yeah.
then that's not a policy, that's a teaching issue.
You want to see some of these, as Katie said, she thinks some of it's in the handbook. Do you want that, or you don't want it in a policy, Judy? You'd rather see it articulated somewhere else?
So would that meet your needs to say teachers can't give their own opinions? I mean, their own, what the word is, but you can't teach my point of view on a subject, I have to open it up to everything. Is that a,
Well, you're gonna teach their point of view, you teach all kinds of things.
And
Yeah.
that's some of our other policies, I believe.
Mark does that.
Yeah. I was actually on my hearing aids, so I think the question you just asked about personal opinions shared on a topic, I think from what I've read here and past practice has been that you can present, let's just say politically, if you're going to present a liberal, conservative, and then somewhere in between, moderate political view. That's the ideal versus teaching one and exclusively to the others. Teachers have typically been discouraged from sharing personal views on the topic, what your personal beliefs are. So if if I'm a supporter of a moderate concept in exclusion to a liberal one, that's not your position because you're supposed to be sharing and talking about the topics. The question I have, and this is from classroom practice, kids are going to ask me, so what's your opinion, Mr. Hetzel? And at that point, I think if it's asked, the teacher should have the right to say, okay, I'm not suggesting that you believe this, but this is my personal opinion. Just like when we respond in board messages, this doesn't reflect the board's position, this is my position. We can't speak on behalf of the board. So do we want the teacher to have that? Is that should that be allowable, I guess? And I don't necessarily see that this disallows that.
I guess I'd like to, thinking about it, I'd like the teacher to say my position is irrelevant, or my opinion is irrelevant to what I'm teaching right now.
But the hard thing is, you're asking the kid to give their opinion.
No, not even asking the kid to give an opinion.
Well, you're if
I'd
you're
like the
having a
kid-
discussion about a topic, they're sharing their opinions. And their thoughts, their reflections. And I can just tell you from experience, at some point, the discussion is, so, Mr. Hetzel, what do you think about this? And should the answer be, well, I'm sorry, I can't share those because it's against policy. How does that affect the interactions and relationship to your student?
I guess it's how it's delivered, you know, it's really, I've shared it with, I think a lot. I really appreciate when my kids, they're in a class and they know that they're at probably odds with the teacher, but they don't care because the teacher does not interject. It's a free, there's noticeable differences in classrooms, right? And I guess that's all up to the teacher on how they deliver that.
Right.
And if it was such that type of environment, as they're describing, like I really appreciate it, like I can share it and I know that I'm not getting demonized, vice versa, that's how it should be. I'd love it to be the case.
Right.
Can you write that? Can you dictate that in policy? I don't know. This allows it to, I guess you should be able to allow them to talk about that, but this speaks to some of the things where it gets kind of touchy on how that's delivered. That we don't have in this really simple policy. That's.
yeah, and I don't think I take any issue with teachers should be doing it appropriately. But I don't think you solve when they don't do it appropriately. I don't think you solve it with policy. Because I think you leave a sensitivity to Mark's point of view when you're establishing a rapport with your kids and you've asked them to share their opinions and you've had a free-flowing discussion and everybody feels good about being able to do that, then a teacher can also say there are points of view and this is mine, and without having hopefully the pressure that mine carries more weight than yours. I just feel this has, as a teacher, I'm looking over my back all the time. If things are in policy. And I think it stifles the rapport with the kids, building the rapport with kids.
I don't know if I totally agree. I think this needs a bit more to it than what it has. Maybe it doesn't go to this level. I guess I'm not comfortable with moving on either of these yet, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it would be good to have a better understanding of what we have in our handbook. And also, I think that was a good question to do that you asked about the
Flow chart,
flow chart, yeah,
the decision
and
making.
where that kind of falls in. I mean, if we have these tools in place and these guidelines in place. I think it helps, like if I were a teacher, it kind of helps me figure out how I'm going to introduce like a more controversial topic. And if there are things in the handbook that also provides parameters and structure, I think it's just good to get more information on where we're at right now. In terms of that, I mean, my personal opinion is that if a best practice would be for students to not know where the teacher stands on their personal opinions of things, because I think that allows for more open communication within the classroom.
It also, I mean,
but
quite
that's
honestly,
just- I
it
don't know.
also,
I'm not an educator, I don't.
this is reality. It also, when you get their opinion, I'm a student, I'm going to want to perform, I want to do well, so I'm going to write in a manner that agrees with my teacher because I'm going to do better. That is reality. That perception is there, and that's real in a lot of cases. I'm not going to disappoint my teacher because I want to do great. And if I don't go, now that's a real, I mean, it's crazy if the teacher thinks that way, but I know that it exists too. So not everyone is the same. I don't think that I'm speaking incorrectly on that. Sometimes those things have place. And I'd want to be I don't want I'm doing this so I get a better grade and no longer. Am I saying that the right way? I'm not really articulating it, but I think there's some. Mark,
Why don't we do this? Why don't
I think
we
Mark
take-
had a comment.
If you don't mind, to me, I spoke with a number of teachers yesterday because I was over there for some other business, and again, this whole concept of trepidation about what they can and can't say. I think this policy is extremely important for the safeguard of our students, but also for empowering our teachers. And so they know what they can and can't do. I don't think we want teachers teaching their political and moral perspective. The role of the teacher is to get kids to think about things. In fact, sometimes it might be helpful for the teacher to play the devil's advocate in certain issues. So you don't know a fact or thing, but just stimulate thought. But as an example, back in 2010, if a teacher were sharing Act 10, you can do that in a way it's this contemporary issue. If you start talking about how it's the worst thing since Hitler or whatever, and now you're dictating a perspective, and that's the kind of thing we don't want. But to be able to talk about it, and it gives us. So, Mr. Russell, what do you really think about Act 10? Is that something we don't want them to hear? We don't want them to be teaching our view, and human nature, there are going to be some folks that want to teach their view. I mean, that's just the reality. And so that we want to avoid. But this, whatever is decided here, it's also got to be a very important message to teachers. We have your back as long as you're and somehow, how do we share this with them so that they understand? You know, it's one thing to create the policy, but then. Okay, how do we share this? And they understand we're not taking away from their individuality as a teacher. I guess that'd be my concern.
You were gonna then say,
I
right?
was just gonna say, maybe the way forward here is for us to, I think, Katie, you were kind of going down the road of kind of, you'd want to see what's in the handbook. How does this relate to the flow chart? I think I'd want to take a look a little bit deeper into what the PRG piece is. You said, Ted, that you don't have a problem conceptually with what our current policy is, but you'd like more to it.
A little bit more.
So are there things that can marry between the
Right.
two? So that would be kind of a conversation as far as what are some of those things that we might be able to kind of blend the two together in some way. And it's probably a little bit of work on us administratively to kind of take a look at that, pull those together. But I think this is I think as a few of you have communicated with different parents, et cetera, that this was going to be a conversation. This is the conversation.
Right.
We might as well bring those pieces forward, have that conversation with the full board around the policy. And it kind of wraps these items together. And then,
I think that sounds good.
so if that's fair enough, I think that's at least the way we can keep the conversation moving, keep the policy moving forward, and then have some discussions as far as how we want to work on it.
Is there a way to have the things that are fleshed out in here in a different place than policy? So that the teacher could refer to this and say, this is kind of the expectation, but it isn't the policy is this, and then you flesh it out in something that doesn't have the weight of policy.
Like a best practice.
Yeah,
It's kind of Katie's question, does it fit into the handbook? The handbook does have the weight of policy, but it is at a place where you can articulate things differently than.
Mhm. Mhm.
We can take a look at that whole breadth of options, and I think that's. It's one of those that it is a contemporary issue for us right now to kind of work through, so let's. Bring some things back, and I think it's probably going to be healthy to have that as kind of a full board discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, the next one here is. We're almost to the end, teaching about religion. The one piece that we made a change to as we met with Ted was just we added the words other belief systems such as. Just to kind of be more inclusive as far as kind of other religions and other belief systems that people may occur here. Otherwise, we are keeping the current policy with that provision. (382) is with regards to classroom disruptions. I think at this point, we were looking to repeal this one. I think that this is really dealing with clerical type duties, etc. It's something I don't think we need as a policy, so I would agree to repeal that item. And then the last one that we have today, and appreciate your patience, is 383.1. This is the service animals in the schools. This is one that Tiffany just wrote just a year or so ago. And we don't have any other. There is a PRG model, but the recommendation was for us to keep the one that we have.
Yeah, I'll just look at this.
Service animals are restricted to dogs. Is that right?
Yeah, what's the other term of that wasn't,
Emotional support?
yeah,
Right.
this is strictly the service animal.
Because on the form, it just says what specific training has the dog, because the dog
That's
has, to
generally what we're getting asked
Yeah.
about, right?
so you don't then bring your parent.
Yeah.
But yes.
It
it's not
basically
the-
is just trying to say, if you're gonna have a dog in that's for some level of service, what
What is that?
you have to have some conversations as
Yeah.
far as what is that, and there's not a lot of specific certificates, etc., tied to it. There are certainly different areas.
But you're asking people to articulate.
That's correct.
what
That's
their
really what the
expectations
purpose
are.
of it is, and we've had to use it a few times since we've put the policy in place.
Is there any condition when you have so many people with allergies you allow a service dog to come in and there sits a kid who can't.
Yeah, you have to
Next
take
one.
all of that into account, absolutely. Mhm. And we had comfort dogs come in the prairie here. A month ago, and it was this one that was, and it was. I've seen those with my daughter too. I've seen programs that she's been in where there's these sort of 5 different groups that come around and they have everything from Saint Bernards to little tiny fluffy dogs. And
Mhm.
we do allow those pieces, but they have protocols we have to follow. But yeah, allergy pieces are definitely things we have to always be
Consider,
conscious
yeah.
of.
So as far as motions,
Yes,
we've excluded some. Do you need them individually called out here or just the ones excluded? Like, how would you like it done?
I think what I would have you do is just,
As presented.
I think what we basically said was that. To move them forward to the board as presented here. Some of these are gonna, like those co-curricular ones are gonna go back to the co-curricular committee first and then find their way through. But I think it's kind of as you stated, as presented here. You'll see those come, like the last one we just did on controversial issues. We'll bring that to the full board with the conversation that we had around it. So as long as you're generally comfortable with how we described the policies here today, you can just do one motion and that's what we'll make sure happens.
So you're saying even these are
The 370s.
370s will,
The 370s and 377s, we're going to renumber and we'll bring those back through co-curricular and back through.
okay,
Yep. Do you want them back through the committee? If we get the, I'm not sure those.
I don't.
I don't,
I think
I don't want to see him again.
No, I think you can just say for those co-curricular items that they can work back through co-curriculars and then to the board.
Yeah, they're the ones that have got.
Yeah.
A handle on the topic more.
Motion to move the policies in today's meeting to our full meeting as presented.
Second,
I'm still not clear though, what the co-curricular one, what are the other ones? You're saying we're going to have the discussion at the board, they're all of these are
Right.
past
The
policy
ones
now.
that we had some modifications to, we'll make the modifications and bring them to the board.
Yeah.
The 370s and 377s will bring back through,
So
the ones that deal with the
Yep.
co-curricular code
correct,
will come back through co-curriculars. The one that just states like
and then from the co-curricular to the board,
to the board.
so they don't have to come back here.
absolutely, yeah,
Right.
the other one, like the one we were just talking about, though, you're saying we're not coming, we're not.
Do you want it back here or do you want that one back, the one that going right to the board? I was gonna bring it right to the board in May, because I think there's
Let's
some work.
let's
to
bring
do.
it back to this one.
All right.
Let's
When
keep
is
that one
our-
on.
when
When
is
is
our
Oh,
our
and that
next?
controversial topics.
Yep.
Why?
I want to see where they land here before we take it forward.
Okay. Who's the they, where they land? Who's-
They're gonna work at,
April meeting.
Oh,
they're gonna work
okay.
at looking at the WASD one along with ours to see if there's.
See if
something.
it's something
And
that
then
they
we'll
can
see
make.
how they
Okay.
policies.
That
All
was
right.
our handbook.
We have another meeting.
Okay, so there's
scheduled.
And I want-
alternatives. We want
yeah.
to see the alternatives before it goes to the
But
board.
it's
Correct.
after.
Okay.
It's going to be a new. committee.
That's true.
We have one scheduled, but it's like May.
Well, it wouldn't happen.
We don't have one, so we need, what we'll need to do then to do that, is we'll need another meeting before
Before our May meeting.
our May meeting. We don't have one in April, I don't think. It'd be long.
No, our next policy committee meeting was May 16th, I want to say.
So,
Oh, May 18th. I have it on the screen.
7:30, May 18th.
so we could do. After.
So the May board meeting is May 8th. So how about that first week in May?
Sure.
So second or the fourth. Any.
We're gonna meet again.
Yeah.
This group before.
Yeah, that's, I think, what Ted was requesting was to meet again to review particularly that policy on controversial pieces before the May meeting. So is there, we looked at like the first week in May, is there a date that's better for you, Ted?
Then we just have one yesterday, we're dealing with May 1st.
Yes, what did we do?
We set up some, you didn't send it out
Yes,
yet.
for some reason, I don't have calendar with me.
I don't think you sent it out yet, but,
It's not on the big calendar yet,
so we have like, a goal at
I can look
7:30
in the
at,
office.
Yeah, this do that, yeah.
Let me run this.
we have a 7:30 on,
Well, and we won't have a reorg, so we'll still be the committee by then.
At that point, yes.
yeah, I want to see.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I know we've had a few committee meetings this week where we scheduled other meetings, so
I'm pretty
Then I
sure
didn't hear
it
yet.
feels like we got May 1st to 7:30 facilities meeting.
I think you're right.
So it could be right. I'm okay with that. May 1st.
Monday
work for me.
first.
That, no, it'd be probably after that, because probably only before that.
Well, it's Labor Day in Mexico, so I
So
don't know, will that
facilities
interfere?
is at 7:30 on May 1st.
Okay.
So I mean.
I don't think that was a long one.
Don't think so either.
I can come Monday,
So Monday after that, like
like
8:30.
8:30,
8:30.
that'll force the other one.
Yeah, we'll sit in the back and make them hurry up.
I appreciate it.
Very good. Let's just schedule that and then as we schedule meetings on Monday, if there's any other conflicts, we can sort them out. Okay. Great.
Okay.
So then there's a motion and a second on everything except the
The conversion.
controversial. All in favor?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.